Pro Football Focus ranked the NFL defensive lines heading into the 2020 season. And I am really, really, really displeased with where they rank the New Orleans Saints. And I like Pro Football Focus. I'm just going to blurt it out. Pro Football Focus ranks the New Orleans Saints defensive line heading into this year as the 13th best defensive line in the NFL. 13th best defensive line in the NFL. Just shy of the halfway point. I like Pro Football Focus. And I like the fact that they try to bring some type of objective data, like some statistical data into things that oftentimes can't be graded, right? Like offensive linemen don't have rushing stats or tackles or things like that. So how do you really grade them? Well, I think Pro Football Focus does a good job of breaking down film and giving grades. So good for them. But I think this also proves that like it's not the be-all end-all. It can't be the be-all end-all because this just doesn't make a lot of sense. And it's not to disrespect other defensive line units in the NFL. Like, for example, they grade out as the best defensive line in the NFL heading into this season, number one, the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm okay with that. You got TJ Watt, who's playing like a defensive player of the year. You got Cameron Hayward and Bud Dupree. I mean, you got some really good players there. I'm okay with Pittsburgh being number one. They got the Eagles number two, and the Eagles have some stud players, Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham. I mean, there's no question. Derek Barnett obviously played really well last season. Malik Jackson's there. They've got some good players. Like, it was a little surprising to see Washington number 3. They've added Chase Young this year, and so that's a bit of an intrigue. Obviously, having the I can't call them the Redskins, the Washington football team, whatever we're going to call them now. There, but Ryan Kerrigan still, Montez Sweat. Washington's pretty, is a pretty good. I'm not surprised to see Washington there, but to see the Saints all the way down at 13 is perplexing for this reason. I can first of all, you have an All-Pro in Cam Jordan, a perennial double-digit sack guy, an All-Pro in Cam Jordan, and then you've also got guys who have been super productive players throughout their career. David Onyemata, while maybe not the most consistent player, has been productive. When he's been healthy, Sheldon Rankins has also been very productive. But both Rankins and Davenport have finished each of the last 2 seasons on IR with season-ending injuries. So I do understand that as well. But you've also gotten some unexpected production out of guys like Shai Tuttle and Taylor Stallworth and even Carl Granderson, who played late for you last year. But here's where I'll come back to that I think is the most important part of this conversation. I think this is a scenario for Pro Football Focus where the whole has got to be greater than the sum of its parts. Last year, the Saints' rush defense was 4th in the NFL at 91.3 yards per game. 4th best rush defense in the NFL. The last time the New Orleans Saints have allowed a 100-yard rusher was November the 19th of 2017 when Samaje Perine ran for 100 yards with the Redskins. It is November 19th of 2017. This November will be 3 years. It's been 2 full seasons. All of 18, all of 19, and the end of 17 since the Saints have allowed a 100-yard rusher. And last year, they were 3rd in the NFL in sacks with 51. Only Pittsburgh and Carolina had more. So you're 4th in the NFL against the rush. You haven't allowed a 100-yard rusher in more than 2 years. You were 3rd in the NFL in sacks last year, one of only 4 teams with at least 50 sacks on the season. How could you, at some point, your eyes don't lie. At some point, your on-field production doesn't lie. Would I like to see Davenport and Rankin stay healthy? Absolutely. Would I like to see Onyemata be more consistent? Of course. Malcolm Brown has been a very pleasant surprise in free agency. And you got some really big surprises with Stallworth and Tuttle last year as undrafted free agents. Fantastic. Maybe it would take adding an Everson Griffin or a Jadeveon Clowney for them to bump up in these rankings. But ultimately, I don't care what your metrics say when the on-field result says one thing that is a polar opposite to what your metric is spitting out. So call it what you will, and I know we talk about Pro Football Focus, and sometimes I think what they do is very good, but this is one of those instances where you have to look at it and say, yeah, Kat, that ain't it, man. You swung and missed on this, and you need to redo whatever metric you got, because the bottom line is when you're looking at the fourth best rush defense in the NFL and the third best team at sacking the quarterback, and you've only got them rated the 13th best defensive line, second in the division, by the way, behind Tampa, that ain't it, dog. It's just not it. I would be thrilled to see New Orleans add another defensive end or defensive lineman if it's team friendly and they're financially able with a $9 million left in cap space. But I'd be more likely, and maybe this is the end all be all, I would be more likely to welcome adding a defensive back because the Saints did struggle against the pass last year. So I'd rather you add someone else in the secondary before you added someone else on the defensive line, considering your defensive line's already producing for you. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.